Coming up, I have a conversation with a fellow CRNA who is helping others to create their own financial cocktail. And while we did have some internet lag issues due to his rural connection, I think you'll still find that it's well worth the listen. Let's jump in. Welcome to the Plan B CRNA podcast. I'm your host, Bobby Jones, and I'm so excited that you're here. The Plan B CRNA podcast is the only show made specifically for nurse anesthetists who are exploring options outside of their traditional career paths. This is the place to expand your mind and your goals as we uncover new ways to produce side income together. Join me for some honest, unscripted discussions with other CRNAs who are transforming their financial lives. This episode is brought to you by On-Call Capital. On-Call Capital is dedicated to educating CRNAs and other healthcare providers about investing outside of the traditional stock market. On-Call Capital also provides opportunities for you, yes, you, to create passive income and generational wealth while also lowering your taxable income through investments in the apartment and alternative investment spaces. If you haven't hit subscribe yet, make sure you do that right now so that you don't miss an episode. Thanks so much for joining me today. And now, on with the show. Welcome to another Provider Spotlight episode of the Plan B CRNA podcast. I'm your host, Bobby Jones, and my guest today is a CRNA who's helping other healthcare providers through his personal finance blog. Leland Murren is a practicing CRNA and founder of The Financial Cocktail. After a conservative financial upbringing and significant self-study, he created a blog sharing his personal finance learnings. Leland is working toward establishing a financial coaching program, as helping fellow CRNAs is a large motivator in why he started this venture in the first place. And his main goals include achieving financial independence, which he is aggressively pursuing with his wife, and educating and inspiring others. The Financial Cocktail is updated weekly alongside a weekly newsletter. Welcome to the show today, Leland. It's great to have you.
Bobby, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Now, we mentioned in that intro that you come from a relatively conservative financial background. I'd love to hear more about that.
Absolutely. I grew up in a lower middle class household, turned middle class, all thanks to a steady income from working hard and living well below their means. So there's no magic, no tricks. It's just consistent paycheck after paycheck saving. And that came from my father working diligently to climb his way up the ladder in the construction industry, and eventually at age 40, becoming an entrepreneur himself. And he always maintained that mindset of living within your means. And fortunately for me, they passed on those teachings. So I'm a big believer that wealth is inherited, not in the literal sense, but rather the teachings of your parents and relatives and close friends and the circles you run with. So those teachings from early on, transparency about finances, really made all the difference. And it set me up for success to pay my way through college, pay my way through anesthesia school. And then at that point in time, by the time I started making anesthesia level dollars, I had a good trial and error, my own learnings, as well as the learnings of my youth. And that's kind of what manifested in a financial cocktail. That's what I write about, what I've done, what I'm trying, what has worked and what hasn't worked. And my parents are really the foundation for my personal finance success.
Very cool. Well, I mean, I think we all learn a lot from our parents. I mean, that's where we get our initial financial education from, because, I mean, Lord knows we're not getting it in, elementary school and middle school and high school. So, but we got to get it from somewhere. And so good and bad habits we often pick up from our parents. So that's cool that your parents were able to hand down some really good habits for you.
Yes.
So, well, becoming financially savvy, though, is more than just, shoving money under your mattress, though. There are obviously other ways to educate yourself. How did you begin to educate yourself on the finer points of personal finance?
Yes, this was a big aspect of what you see in my blog. They were very conservative based on the teachings from their parents back in the days when CDs and certificates of deposit were kind of the thing to have, because you could get 8, 9, 10% interest on them. But that hasn't been the case for decades now. So if methods don't change as time goes on, you become like Kodak and you become outdated and you're not updating your portfolio. The other big difference that my parents had was the entrepreneurial aspect. So it wasn't necessarily working for a paycheck, but more thinking about the jobs and overhead and business expenses. As I left the nest, so to speak, I started reading about other avenues of personal finance investing. And that started with a little bit from Dave Ramsey was the first one, a radio show that was on AM radio I would catch regularly.
For sure.
And then I progressed into some more readings. Rick Edelman is a big fan favorite, similar to Dave Ramsey, but uses a little bit more of a mathematically applied principle. And then I started researching more on the investing side of things from John Bogle, the Vanguard founder. And that's where my interest for low cost, passively managed index funds developed. And it showed the advantage of cutting down your costs while taking the gains of the market, not being greedy, trying to do too crazy of maneuvers. It said, take the market consistently year after year, which is again something that was different from my parents because all their surplus income either went to CDs or was reinvested into the business. So their more conservative fixed income pieces were the CDs, and their increased volatility, riskier investments were essentially the business to develop it for another year and to expand and grow and so on and so forth. And then my most recent book, which is likely my biggest recommendation, and those who come to me for financial coaching, I can often refer them to The Simple Path by J.L. Collins. Fantastic book, very applicable for CRNAs and CRNA income, where I feel like some of the other teachings are generalized more towards the general population, looking at an income nowadays, 50, 60,000 a year. Well, a lot of the tax implications are vastly different as your income increases, your access to retirement accounts changes. You end up losing your access to a Roth IRA as your income grows, and taxes just in general become a much heavier burden. So my blog really takes bits and pieces from all of these avenues and puts together what I feel at this point in time is one of the more efficient investment strategies and personal finance strategies all in all.
Yeah, that's, something that my own financial education really evolved over time because I started off with, I save and I put things into retirement accounts. And from an early age, it was all about those low cost index funds, which I'm still a very big fan of. They can really do wonders over time. But there is a big difference between investing with a nurse salary versus a nurse anesthesiologist salary, because as you mentioned, your tax hit is different. And so, you have to learn different ways to invest your dollars to try and remove some of those tax hits if you can, and I love that you brought up about your parents and their investment style being in either CDs or in their business itself, because there's no one way that is the right way for everybody to build wealth. And, many people who do very well for themselves financially are doing things just like that. They're investing in themselves, in their businesses, and seeing where that takes them. And it is risky. It can be risky, but it can really pan out. I mean, my in-laws were able to retire when, my father-in-law was 48 years old because he was an engineer and he was, a VP of a company, and he just bought that company's, internal, stock over, hand over fist. And that's what they did. They lived below their means, and he invested in that company. And because he knew how that company was being run, he knew the risks involved with it. And so, it is, I think, something to be said that there are many different ways to invest. And as nurse anesthesiologists, as, PAs, as physicians, we have a lot of different opportunities.
Absolutely. The opportunities are endless. And I like that a lot of the terminal degrees and the healthcare providers you mentioned, the investment into themselves has been very significant. Just looking at the years of training for CRNAs, right? The nursing degree, the time in the ICU, possibly other time floating around other jobs before nursing school, and then making the big leap into going into anesthesia. It's quite the investment into oneself, which, if done reasonably early in the career, will pay exponentially on the back end, which is phenomenal. So then it's always the question, where do you go from there? And there's still great business opportunities, outside of healthcare or within healthcare. However folks like to do it, and how much time and effort they're willing to put in, and how much risk they're willing to take on a new venture, sort of a venture capital approach, or starting a new company, or going down a different avenue. And yeah, everything can be individualized to someone's own risk tolerance. Because at the end of the day, you have to be able to sleep at night, and that's something that I always try to remind people is whatever you do, you have to be able to live with your choices. And at the end of the day, it's important to study up ahead of time, know the pros and the cons, or the advantages of the risks and the disadvantages of the risks. What's my upside potential and what's my downside potential? And if that's something you can live with, well, then go for it.
Yeah. Well, and I always look back at, when I'm mainly invested in stocks well, I shouldn't say stocks, index funds, but I took about a 5 to 10% chunk out of that, and I started making individual stock investments, and it was fun, and I learned from it, and I did really well. But man, my mind was always on how those stocks were doing. And meanwhile, the rest of my portfolio is growing just fine, and I don't have any concerns about it. And, but I was always watching those stocks, and it took up way too much of my time and mental energy. So, knowing yourself, I think, is a big part of it, like you said.
Yeah. Yeah. Folks do that for a full-time job and still struggle to outperform the market. Sure, they have their wins and they have their losses. When you think about mutual funds, right? Baskets of stocks managed by a team, and they still struggle to keep up with just the flat index funds of the market. I mean, those folks have all the training that the CRNA community has in healthcare. They have that in finance and stocks and economics, and to see that those savants of the investing world still only break even on a good day is it's pretty humbling, actually. Pretty humbling.
Yeah, well, and I mean, that was the whole thing that drove me to low cost index funds in the first place. I was a big fan of the Motley Fool. I don't know, this was back in the late 90s, early 2000s, and of course now they still do some great things, but it can seem a little, like they're pushing their own, products and stuff sometimes. But their basic financial education was just right up those lines. Hey, you have index funds that make up the majority of your portfolio, and you can always invest in individual stocks, but they have to be great companies, and you don't need to have hundreds of them. You just pick out the ones that are, really well run and first movers in their industry and things like that. So, I think there's a lot to be said for that, but also not having that be too big of a part of your portfolio, because again, if the guys that are out there who are trained in this, are struggling, then what's to say, we're necessarily going to do any better. So,
yep, that's a big downfall that you get the physician stereotype that they make a lot of money, they're highly educated, smart people, and they are terrible with personal finance.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that brings me to my next question, which is, hey, it is one thing to worry about your own finances, and it's another thing to look out for others. And as healthcare providers, I know, like, we are just intuitively going to look out for other people. But I'm wondering what it is specifically that led you to start the financial cocktail, and when did that happen? When was that spark?
Yeah, so I've had an itch to do this for quite some time. It actually manifested last October of 22. And it was a lot of analysis paralysis, which I'm sure you see in the real estate world quite a bit, but that was a very real thing for me. It's very awkward and embarrassing to put yourself out there. And if you try to skirt around the details and the personal aspects, it doesn't have the same touch as, hey, this is me, this is what I'm doing, this is my situation, these are this is where I'm going right, and this is where I'm struggling. And I'm trying to find that balance of putting myself out there and making it relatable to those around me. And not that I do something others can't do or know something others don't know. All of my resources are, for the most part, public knowledge, and there's lots of great education sources out there. So this is my way of trying to give back to the community, because I'm a relatively young CRNA. So there's plenty of folks out there that are better at, doing the academia side, or teaching nerve blocks, or teaching this or that in the anesthesia side. That's just not a place for me. I haven't been in the game long enough to work on a lot of 1099 content or help people in that way. But what I have seen is a real gap in the personal finance, kind of the building blocks, the foundation of someone's financial health. There's a lot of questions posted on the social media sites that are about very specific business expenses or more advanced investing techniques. And I just got thinking to myself, I feel like there's a lot of folks that are overlooking just the basics of living below your means and taking a look at the taxes and some tax advantage retirement accounts and what those things can, how they can really impact someone's financial picture 30 years down the road. I like to think about it as if someone saves, let's say 10,000 a year, and they're worried about stretching their return on investment from 10% to 20%, it's going to be a game changer. Well, what if instead of saving 10,000 a year and worrying about how you could grow that, why not save 40,000 a year or 60,000 a year? I said, you're going to be so much farther ahead just taking your 8 to 10% and figuring out how to live your life accordingly. And that's one thing that the financial coaching side is really great for, is just having someone else take a look at your finances. And it's coaching instead of advising, because I feel like advising is a funnel. You go to an advisor, you sort of submit to their way of doing things. And the financial coaching aspect, I feel as though it's more about as a team, a dynamic duo on this financial journey together. So someone can come to me and say, hey, I don't mind working. I'm okay working until I'm 50, 60. That's not a problem for me. But what I would like to do is, have a huge house, or maybe I would like to go on 4 big vacations a year. And that's great. That's what they prioritize. That's what, fills their bucket, puts some spark in the life. Doesn't really matter if that's what I would do, but it allows me to put myself in their shoes and say, okay, if I wanted to go on 4 vacations a year, how would I do that? Plus still put away some money for retirement. So I could retire at 50, 60, still shy of 65 and make this work and really live in the present and still save. And vice versa. Someone might say, hey, I'm in, XYZ profession because it pays well and I can retire early. And that's a priority to me, to be able to retire early so I can spend time with my kids and my family and travel. And I don't want to be tied to a hospital. I want to be able to go part-time and work when I want, work a couple weeks a quarter and make a couple bucks doing it like that. It's great. So now we're taking a different lens, different approach. And I think it's one of the things that I really get joy out of doing the coaching side of things. And it's a new puzzle every time, right? Kind of like anesthesia. Not all patients are just the same.
Yeah. Hey, I mean, there's an art to it. And that was the thing that I loved about providing anesthesia, was the art that was involved in getting to know the individual patient and being able to cater what you're doing to their specific needs. I mean, that was just part of the fun for me. And so, and I've found that too with what I do now with helping people invest in apartment buildings. Like, you don't have to invest all of your money in apartment buildings, but having a portion of your portfolio there could be beneficial to you. But I don't know your situation. You have to figure out if that's something that would work for you and helps you get to where you want to be with your goals.
Yeah, I'm sure you see that regularly, both with the amount of money people are looking to use to diversify, because I'm guessing their 401k isn't in real estate, so they're looking for something different with the money on top, looking for a different avenue, some different exposure, and that's great. Real estate has some phenomenal upsides to it, and it's something that I've only written about a little bit, just trying to get into it. But living in a small town doing the critical access type anesthesia work, the real estate market for personal investors is kind of tight. So that would be a good avenue, getting involved in a group for some kind of real estate exposure.
Yeah. So I do want to go back though, because we've kind of touched on some different things, but just getting back to, like, what are some of the basic tenets of your financial philosophy and the pieces of advice that you typically put out there for others to think about, and really how has that evolved over time? Because we talked about some of the different books that you've read over the years, but how has that philosophy evolved over time? And as you've gone from somebody who, earns as a nurse to now earning as a CRNA?
The one consistency that I've had all the way through is maintaining my standard of living. It's always been very modest because it makes everything else exponentially easier. And that was a big decision going into anesthesia initially from age 15, looking at potential careers. And I said, this is a good field to go into. So nursing's a great field. And then anesthesia looks like a pretty good bet. The job numbers going up. The pay is very respectable, well over middle class income. Again, this was over 10 years ago, but it was looking like a really solid choice for a profession. And then getting into it, I really couldn't be happier with my decision for a handful of reasons. So, but it would allow me to live a very comfortable lifestyle and still put money away, because a lot of the financial cocktail revolves around financial independence. And financially independent retire early movement has been a fairly big thing recently. And it essentially comes down to ratios. And this was something that I learned through my self-study, was that retirement is not necessarily the age of 65. Retirement is more cost of living versus nest egg. How long can your nest egg support your cost of living? And what do you need to be invested in so your nest egg will grow and you can just tap off of the interest or the dividends and not touch the principal? That's kind of the taboo thing, is to not touch the principal of the portfolio. So I kind of got thinking and reading and taking notes. And that's essentially what the financial cocktail turned into, was the long form of my notes for myself. And I just figured I would put that out there in effort to pay back some of my peers for all the things that they've done. And the profession is very rewarding. So I started out and I said, okay, what did I do? And a lot of this is a little bit tough for me to put out there, because I started at such a young age that I didn't graduate school with debt. So instead, I looked at that on the front end. And I said, when I was in high school, right, when I was 15, I decided this was going to be my path. I said, okay, my in-state tuition is going to cost me, at the time, it was $60,000. So it's going to be 4 years, everything included. And I said, okay, as a 15-year-old, I'm going to pretend I'm $60,000 in the hole. And I worked during the summers a lot, worked on the weekends, I worked every week, tried to pick up a little bit on holidays, pretending that I was $60,000 in debt. Fortunately, I had enough to just scrape my way by. A couple little scholarships in there, but nothing too crazy. Mostly making $10 an hour running a shovel on a roof. So pretty proud of that accomplishment. And then as a nurse, I was able to kind of expand this a little farther, and I made sure I had an emergency fund set aside, which is one of my very basic principles. Everyone should have a couple bucks sitting on the side. I'd like to see $1,000 or $2,000 at bare minimum hanging out. And that was something I was able to do. And I looked at the tuition for anesthesia school, which at the time was $88,000 is what they quoted me. And I said, whoa, so just starting their job and really trying to get into anesthesia school, because that's the goal here. So I knew time was of the essence, and putting money away was of the essence. So again, I just kind of pretended I was 6 figures in debt and had to make it happen. So that's where I really became good at budgeting, which is a foundational concept of personal finance, right? You gotta know where your money goes. So I still put a couple bucks into a 401k. I didn't know much about the Roth IRAs at that time, or otherwise I probably would have put more into that. And same with the health savings account. It's a great tax advantage account. Didn't know anything about that. Didn't actually start one until I became CRNA. But so fortunately, I didn't have to worry about paying off any debt from undergrad. So I kind of skipped right to the next step of paying off. And I was able to do that by the time I graduated anesthesia school. So then my next big step is really contributing to these tax advantage accounts. So 401k, since I'm a W-2 employee, right? I work for someone else. So I have access to employer-sponsored retirement accounts. So I max that out, and any other pre-tax accounts. Pre-tax is more valuable as your income goes up. Since your tax bracket's higher, pre-tax is the way to go, in my opinion. So your health savings account, your 401k, those are really great things. So I push those, and my wife pushes those, and we put as much away as we can. And then it comes down to a personal brokerage. And this is, again, really where my self-study took over, prioritizing kind of those low-cost funds, my expenses down to just get the return of the market. And at the same time, we ended up taking a mortgage on a house. And that was kind of a tough one, because that's the first actual debt that I have ever taken on. So we did take out a mortgage on a personal residence, which is okay. We didn't catch quite the low interest rates, but we're not when size today, right around 5%. So then it comes into the dilemma of, well, do we pay off the house and take the 5%, or do we invest elsewhere and try and better our 5%? So that's kind of been an ongoing discussion, which, again, in the financial coaching aspect, you can kind of present the pros and the cons and say, hey, are you okay with, essentially saving the 5% if you want to pay your house off, or are you looking to, be a little more aggressive? But it's all personal preference. But yeah, at this point, we're just really stashing away as much cash to offset that that cost of living and ultimately get to the financial independence number, which is approximately 25 times your cost of living. So we're well aware of where we have to be with a pretty conservative estimate. And there's some nuances to that. But for the most part, that's a rough estimate. That's one other thing that I wasn't sure about until I started my self-study is since retirement isn't age 65, well, how do I know how much I need to retire? So it was kind of nice to have some of these rough landmarks in there to kind of give the ship a heading, so to speak. And I say, if you set aside X amount and it compounds, how many years are you looking? So we did ours backwards. And I said, okay, if we're going to try and be financially independent at age 35, let's rewind. How much do we have to put away per month? Then it gives you a number. And that's kind of where the aggressively attacking the financial independence aspect comes in, because it was kind of a bold move, but I'm always up for a good challenge. So it's something I welcome for sure.
Yeah, it's cool to be able to shoot for it, and really go for it. And, hey, life's gonna happen, and you may end up having 5 kids or something, that kind of throws your finances a little bit more wacky. But that's life. And what really counts is starting as soon as you can and giving that nest egg time to grow over time, and that's really what helped us to be able to make some of the financial moves that we've made. And I've seen other people have a lot of success with that because, compound interest, just you give it time, and 30 years is a lot different from 20 years, and if you got 40 years till retirement, then that's even better for your nest egg to continue to grow. So it just, it depends on what you can do. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, or you said you're married. Do you have any children yourself?
No children. So we're
Okay.
dual income, no kids at this point in time.
Yeah. Couple of dinks. I love it. Cause that was when my wife and I saved, I won't say that we saved the most money at that point, but we were really able to get started with that intention, that intentionality. And we lived on one income, completely saved the other. And it was great. It was the time of our lives and we were loving it. And, but then, you start to have kids and you start to have daycare and diapers and all kinds of other expenses. And so, there are different things that come into play as you advance, and not everybody chooses to have kids. Maybe you got fur babies, that happens, but it goes back to that personalized aspect. Everybody's goals are different. Some people really want a large family. Some people want a farm. Some people, want to take those vacations every year and be world travelers. Some people want a house, a vacation house by the beach. So figuring out what your actual goals are and structuring whatever it is you're doing to try and meet those goals is really important. So, but I want to read a quote from your website because I found it to be particularly powerful. And I figure you got it on there for a reason too. So it's a definition of hell is that on your last day on earth, the person you became will meet the person you could have become. What does that mean to you?
That has been my life motto for a very long time now. And it's the only thing, I'm not exaggerating. It's the only thing that allowed me to get over the embarrassment of starting this blog and putting myself out there and going through school. English was my least favorite class by far. I don't view myself as a strong writer, but I said, if I don't try this, if I don't give it a go, I'm going to regret it. I really am. And it's something that I apply to most things. Research it first before you jump into something. But when you've done all of your research, your analysis, and you're reasonably confident about something, you run out of excuses as to why not to do it. And there's a lot of folks that have a similar mindset. I know Matthew McConaughey, great actor, by the way, said something at an awards show, giving a speech, and they asked him about who his idol was, whose role model was. He thought about it, and he said, well, it's me. And say he was 20 years old. He said, it's me at the age of 30. So it's nobody else. So then when he reaches age 30, they said, are you your idol? Have you done it? Have you accomplished everything you wanted to accomplish? He goes, no. No, my idol was me at age 40. My idol was always 10 years ahead of me. And I'm always trying to keep pace with, with what I could be. And that's kind of cool to know that folks who are successful in their own discipline kind of have a similar thought about things, that they're not going through life complacently, and they're really trying to better themselves and better the community, and really give back and put themselves out there, and they're really thinking about the decisions they made.
Yeah, that's cool, man. And that leads perfectly into my next question, which is, where do you see the financial cocktail going in the next 5 to 10 years? Where do you see yourself, the idol, going?
I would love to continue with the weekly blog every Tuesday, putting something out there, whatever comes to mind. I feel like I've done a pretty decent job upholding my New Year's resolution, which was to post every Tuesday. But I would like to expand it into more of the financial coaching aspect. Right now, it's all individual coaching, it's no charge. I get people email me on my website, and most of the folks are already pretty studied up. They come with very good questions, and they're already folks who have a lot of their finances figured out, and just must have been that community that was drawn to reading my earlier blog posts, because when they would ask me the questions about their personal finances, I'm thinking, wow, you guys don't really have it together. So there is a community, and there has to be a community of folks that don't read my blog who could benefit from it. And I'm not saying that's because my blog is the greatest thing out there, but there are other free financial resources that folks who are struggling with finances, living paycheck to paycheck. There's a huge percentage. Last statistics show folks over, making 100,000 a year, 250,000 a year, 1 in 3 are going paycheck to paycheck. And that's astonishing to me. And I totally believe it. Everybody's in their own circumstances. In the next 5 to 10 years, I'd like to try and find a way to tap into that community, and it'll probably turn into something like group sessions, small groups, kind of like Dave Ramsey's financial piece started at churches and small groups, and he was able to reach out to folks that way and kind of multiply his impact by having a small community or getting together on Zoom or whatever the case may be. But those are some folks that I think could really use it. And if it's some information that I could provide to them that might make their life less stressful, so it improve their relationships or improve their marriage, or make it so they don't have to work 2 jobs or work until they're 80 years old. Those are all wins in my book. And I really started the financial cocktail saying, if I could make that impact for just one person, it'd be worth it. And now we're just raising our sights a little bit and seeing if we could, broaden the riffle and see if we can get hold some more folks and hopefully teach some lessons, and then have them, just like my parents did, right, pass those lessons along, and then impact the generational tree by living a way that takes the stress off finance. Because, man, I tell you what, life's a whole lot better when you're not strapped for cash, and I'd be hard pressed to find someone who argues the other way. So, not saying you have to live a life of luxury or even have a lot of cash, but just kind of putting those ratios in order as far as living within your means and setting yourself up for retirement the day to come. If I could deliver that message sometime in the coming years, I'd be fairly pleased.
Awesome, man. Hey, I love it. I love it. Well, before we get out of here, I want to give people the chance to reach out to you. How can they get a hold of you? How can they find you?
Absolutely. I have a couple links on the financial cocktail. We have a link on the contact us page or tab, and the financial coaching tab on the financial cocktail. Another great way, it goes to my email. Otherwise, it's going to be my initials for my email on the financial cocktail, LD Murren, MURREN at thefinancialcocktail.com.
Cool, man. And we will have
questions
that
and inquiries, and happy to help.
Awesome, man. Well, we're going to have that in the show notes for people to check out. And dude, this has been a lot of fun. I've enjoyed talking with you, getting to know you a little bit better. And I look forward to seeing how you and the financial cocktail continue to grow.
Bobby, I appreciate it. It's been great.
I really enjoyed this conversation with Leland because it's clear that he's gone through his own financial journey, starting with his childhood and his parents' influence, but he also continues to grow. And his blog, The Financial Cocktail, is his way of continually examining his own path while also helping others. You may have noticed that the basic tenets of his philosophy are similar to others who are also teaching you to build wealth. You live below your means. You put money into investments such as low-cost index funds that are proven to work over time. And you also lower your taxable income through the use of retirement accounts and real estate. A lot of those FIRE movement tactics. And Sometimes we do tend to make things out to be more complex than they need to be. I'm definitely included in that too, by the way. I mean, I'm no stranger to making things harder than they need to be. But there's a lot to be said for simplicity. And just as a simple cocktail with just a couple of ingredients can still taste great, a simple financial cocktail can help you to build wealth for your family and your retirement. That's going to do it for the show. If you'd like to learn more about Leland and his journey, you can find his contact info in the show notes or visit his website at thefinancialcocktail.com. This is Bobby Jones signing off. Until next time, stay safe and take care of each other out there. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of the Plan B CRNA podcast. If you haven't already subscribed and reviewed the show, I'd be honored if you took the extra time. It really helps to expand our reach and get the word out about the show. If you're a CRNA who is interested in sharing your story on our podcast, I'd love to have you. Please email me at bobby@oncallinvestments.com for more information. This episode was brought to you by On-Call Capital. They are dedicated to helping providers like you develop passive income and generational wealth through investments in the apartment and alternative investment spaces. Feel free to check out their website at www.oncallinvestments.com and subscribe to their free educational email series. You can find On-Call Capital on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can also check out our YouTube page, where you'll find all of the show episodes along with other educational videos. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.